Coming up on Network Africa, U.S. President Donald Trump asks his Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, to study the issue of killing of farmers in South Africa. Ugandan lawmaker and pop star Bobi Wine charged with treason in a civilian court shortly after a military court freed him. And Madagascar's High Constitutional Court clears 36 candidates to run in the country's upcoming presidential elections. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Teniola Shobowale. We begin today in the United States, where President Donald Trump has directed his Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, to closely study the South Africa land and farm seizures and the killing of farmers there. Mr. Trump's tweet appeared to be a response to a Fox News report on Wednesday that focused on South Africa's land issue and killings of white farmers. However, in an official tweet, the South African government rejected President Trump's tweet on land reforms as a narrow perception that divides the nation. Early this month, President Cyril Ramaphosa said that the ruling African National Congress will forge ahead with plans to change the constitution to allow the expropriation of land without compensation. White farmers still own most of South Africa's land more than 2 decades after the end of apartheid. Let's get more on this story from an international affairs analyst, Calvin Duck. It's always a pleasure to have you on the program.
Thank you.
What do you make of President Trump's tweet that the U.S. Secretary of State should study the issue of killings of white farmers in South Africa?
Well, one thing's for sure. You can always tell what President Trump is really passionate about by what he tweets. I thought it was really unfortunate when he tweeted it because we all know he doesn't speak out passionately about Africa except for the derogatory comments he made earlier this year. Yet he chose this time to speak out passionately, not consulting his own State Department about the supposed killing of white farmers after he saw them live tweeting cable news show. Keep in mind, he's the President of the United States, yet he has time to live tweet cable news on a regular basis.
So do you think he's doing this to take attention away from his own political issues happening in his country?
I think on some level, that's most of what he does and tweets to try to deflect attention. But I think what's really important here is the show that he was referring to, that he mentioned in the tweet, Tucker Carlson. They have a very clear agenda that they believe that white men, white people are victims of racism and are under assault in the United States. They even mentioned this in the segment they did on the issues in South Africa. So this fits right along with that propaganda that racism is actually affecting white people as well. President Trump knows that when he tweeted about that, and when he referenced Tucker Carlson, he really scored points with members of his base who really buy that.
So South Africa has quite a lot of issues that it's battling with at the moment. There's the issue of domestic abuse, widespread killing of women and children, and even xenophobia. Why is the president more focused on the issue of land expropriation that hasn't even started?
Well, one, I think it shows, unfortunately, that he is not in contact or regular substantive contact with the State Department. But it also shows that, the United States elected a reality show president. He is moved by what he sees on TV. He saw something that could score points, and he tweeted about it. And that isn't good for U.S. foreign policy because who knows what he might see or might read or somebody might tell him, and all of a sudden he puts out a statement that reflects U.S. foreign policy.
So Mr. Trump's tweet comes days after it was announced that the U.S. First Lady, Melania Trump, will travel to Africa in October for her first major solo international trip as First Lady. What impact, if any, is this likely to have on the First Lady's visit?
It won't have a real impact on the planning and the execution of the visit. I think if South Africa was one of the proposed countries, that might be under reconsideration. But I think it underscores the main point about all of this with the First Lady's trip. President Trump undermines his own administration, his State Department, the people that are supposed to be carrying out what he wants through his tweets and what he says. So this is just a reminder that before her trip and probably during it, President Trump may say, tweet, or do something that undermines whatever she may do. It may overshadow the good things that she could accomplish. So in that sense, it will affect it, and it's probably making people rethink the value of the trip.
Thank you so much, Calvin Dark, International Affairs Analyst, for your thoughts on that.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, South Africans have hit back at US President Donald Trump's tweet on land reform debate. The South African government rejected his comments, calling it a narrow perception which only seeks to divide our nation and remind us of our colonial past. South Africans on Twitter were equally unimpressed. Some say the president's tweet has racist overtones, while others say he should stay out of the debate as South Africa is not the 51st state of the United States. According to a tweet he posted on Wednesday, Mr. Trump has asked U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo to study South African land and farm seizures and expropriation and the large-scale killing of farmers. In January, South Africa protested to the U.S. Embassy in Pretoria about reported derogatory remarks made by Trump on immigrants from Africa and Haiti. South Africa's foreign ministry called the remarks, which sources said President Trump made during a meeting on immigration legislation, crude and offensive. More on this story now from Professor Bola Akinterinwa, the former Director General of the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs. Thank you for joining us on the program, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Professor, is President Trump really concerned about the issue of land reforms in South Africa, or could this be an attempt to distract attention from his legal and political troubles in the United States?
Yes, I will subscribe to the opinion that on the one hand, he's much concerned about the issue of land in South Africa for obvious reasons. You know, South African Parliament already passed a resolution according to which there will be expropriation of land, but without compensation. So, when we know quite well the background of Donald Trump, there's no way he wouldn't be concerned. Because already, you know, he says he wants to promote America first. The foreign policy is to make America great again. So in this case, this is one element you can, you can consider. Now, another reason is that Donald Trump wants to protect the white, all right, to the detriment of the black South Africans. So this is one reason he should be, be concerned. And when you talk about possible distraction, of course, it's a good, diversion. He has too many domestic problems, and he needs to have an easing of tension. So he must try to divert perception from all the problems he's having back home. So in both ways, I quite agree with you. He's concerned and he's engaging in distraction politics.
Okay, so the South African government has rejected President Trump's comment, but how else should they respond to this tweet?
I want to believe that there are 2 or 3 possible ways. The first one is that there is need for public enlightenment, because not many people do know what land reform is all about in South Africa. In Namibia, in Zimbabwe, in South Africa, it's the same problem. They call the problem Shimurenga in Zimbabwe. That is, land is divided into categories on the basis of quality. The best quality is given to white Zimbabweans. The same is true in South Africa. And the issue now is that the land policy in South Africa is about restitution. redistribution, and tenure reform. So in this case, the land that was unfairly acquired, taken away from black people in 1913, now efforts are now being made to redistribute, to reallocate. This is the problem. So there is the need for public enlightenment on that. The second way out is now for the government of South Africa to just do what is right. If it is done rightly, on the basis of justice and fairness, I think that that would be the best way forward. Nobody can come from 1,000 miles away, and now you took land from the black people, and efforts are now being made to be fair. Please, this is what is required at the level of a permanent solution to the problem.
Professor Bola Akinterinwa, the former Director General of the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs, thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you, it's a pleasure.